Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this sunny evening. I am Councillor Alex Sanderson and I chair the Wormwood Charitable Trust. Firstly, could I remind everybody of a few housekeeping points? Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. Please wait until I call on you before speaking, and can officers introduce themselves when they first address the committee, please? Right, item number 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies for absence from Matt Rumble and from Councillor Rowbottom from the committee. Emery, have we received any other apologies for absence?
No other apologies for absence.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Belinda, I don't have any declarations of interest, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Do members approve the minutes of the meeting held on 3rd of August 2021, or are there any amendments? I have got one comment. Neil, it may be that the fact that you are on from the law enforcement team may answer this, but I asked that a breakdown was provided on the difference between the type of incidents that needed to be reported to the LET team and the Metropolitan Police. Has that been drawn up and circulated?
That hasn't, no, sorry, Chair. I will action that as soon as I'm able. Apologies. That's
absolutely fine. I think that would be helpful, as I think particularly with this being a newish service, I think there's been a bit of confusion about what is referred to LET and when a response time would be expected versus what should be reported to the Met. So that would be lovely. Are there any other comments or questions on the minutes? Stephen?
Just, Chairman, to ask whether the items at the end described as members requested the following actions be carried out. Do they come up later, or should we have them dealt with now?
Which page are you looking on?
Page 5, just above the end of the minutes. And members requested the following actions.
Oh, yeah.
Find whether HS2 have consulted the Ministry of Defence and so on.
That is a good point. Steve, can you see those questions and give us an update?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair. So HS2 hadn't consulted the Ministry of Defence. Adesir was following that up with them. I think the compulsory purchase order information is on the agenda, as is the issue about the land return. The issue about transferred at no cost, I believe, is a misunderstanding that they were expecting the transfer from us to them to be at no cost and back at no cost, an agreement proposed to be put in place, but that's for us to determine. And again, they've clarified that it's for, there's no other use of the land once they've finished their work, because of the easements required to the utilities, so you can't build anything or put anything on there, and that's also on the agenda. But again, I haven't had something guaranteed in writing. And we are pursuing that. Again, that's on the agenda.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, as you said, that's on the agenda. I'm just having a scroll through the minutes of both the meeting on the 23rd of June and the 3rd of August. The Pony Centre comes up later in your manager's report, doesn't it?
Yes, that's correct,
yeah.
Chair.
Fine. Fine. Great. If there's nothing on the minutes, are those approved? And we're looking at both ones on the 3rd of August and the 23rd of June. Fine. Approved by me. Looks like approved by everyone else.
Yeah,
thank you. Lovely. Okay, item 4, the manager's report. Steve, could you introduce this item, please?
Yes, I will. I didn't introduce myself either, Chair. So Steve Hollingworth, Assistant Director for Leisure, Sport and Culture, and also the Trust Manager. So the Manager's report, the first item is just an update on the Kensington Dragons agreement. Last time we asked approval for the grant agreement to be delegated, and I can confirm that has been executed now, and they will draw down funding once invoices have been received from the work done to us. I haven't got a detailed timetable as yet of when the work will start, but that's certainly the grant agreement is sorted. If I can go on to three rather, Chair. So the master plan, so there was concern about the timescale on this. Heather, has given her apologies, I should have put that in the minutes. She's come up with a specification for a draft engagement plan to be tendered, and the timetable with consultation and writing up the report is likely to come back to this committee in June 2022. I think there's some issues potentially with the consultation just to be aware of, because the funding from HS2 has specific items attached to it, largely around the habitat and creation of habitat. Although they did fund the consultation last time, and we have been in touch with them, and they've said if there's a rationale and a plan that they could see about further consultation, they will consider it. But it's just to say that, are you happy for us to go ahead and go out to tender on the proviso that we may have to fund it if HS2 refuse?
Thank you, Steve. I've already briefly talked about this with Stephen. I completely understand the frustrations in this being delayed. The reason why we're doing this, I very strongly felt that original consultation exercise was really poor. Very few local people were reached. Lots of the views that were expressed were lost quite quickly. And given the events that have taken place over the past year, I've had a huge number of residents write to me about what their vision for the scrubs could be, what they would like from the scrubs. And given the scale of this project, the amount of money that's being put into it, you know, the cost, the time that this is all going to take, it felt like it would be remiss to not reopen this consultation, try and get some more views, because the strength of feeling that I've had from residents across the borough has been so strong about talking about what people would really like from the scrubs. I think a big consultation and engagement event is a really key part of this. I think it needs to be better than what we had before with LUC. I mean, LUC are obviously welcome to apply if we do go out to tender, in my view, but we'd need to see a pretty robust plan for engagement that's a lot better than the last one. So that's my view on it. Miriam and Stephen, I know you will have views as well, so please do chime in.
Thank you very much. I think that the Friends or the Friends trustees are extremely frustrated at the length of time all this has taken. It's now, I think, 18 months or nearly 2 years since the process began. And if I've understood you correctly, you're basically throwing out the work that LUC did and starting again. It's not just a consultation on their proposals, it's a start again. And on that basis, it's understandable that it's going to take till sometime next year. But it's extremely frustrating, and so many things that have been waiting on this can't now be got on with. So I would strongly urge that if we really are starting again completely, whether it's with LUC or new consultants, firstly, what a waste of money that we've had so far out of the HS2 allocation of money for this project. And secondly, to see whether there is any way of accelerating it so that we can get to it in our spring meeting or a special meeting in April for the purpose, rather than waiting till June next year, because work ought to start next spring.
Thank you, Stephen. As I say, I mean, it would be great, Steve, if we can look at ways to try and accelerate that timetable if at all possible. Again, completely understand the frustrations. I think from our perspective, especially with council budgets as they are, it felt like such a unique opportunity to have this amount of money to spend on an amazing green space in the borough. And so it just feels really important to get it right, and make sure that it is something that the community have really, really bought into. And again, I mean, you will know from friends as well as we do as the council, the passion that people have for the scrubs has become so evident over the past year. To us, to me, it feels really, really important to try and make sure we've got all of those voices being heard about the future of the scrubs. But as I say, I completely understand the frustrations about the extension to the timetable. Miriam.
Yes, sorry, I mean, obviously I second what Stephen says, but just for clarification, the idea is to appoint consultants who are specialised in community engagement to go out and consult on the existing master plan or the last draft of the master plan, while then knowing that it may end up being reworked substantially. I guess that's question one. And then question two is, if HS2 won't fund this, how much is this envisaged to cost?
Steve, can I pass that to you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On question one, we're not certainly going to throw away the work LUC has done. That will form part of this new consultation as sort of a baseline in a sense. So that work will certainly be part of it. And this is more about specialists in consultation rather than the master plan itself. And LUC, you know, are still around for that. So it's working those together. I think the second question is, the honest answer is I don't know until we go out to tender. Yeah, so I wouldn't like to put a guess on it, but it's you know, it's hopefully it's you know, 10,000 or less. One would hope. Yes, that sort of order.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I mean, I think, yeah, just sort of ballpark. I think the sort of question really was, yeah, is it 10,000 or is it 50 or 100? But so, yeah, that's 10,000 or less, I think, is, if the trust has to fund it itself, that's livable with.
Stephen?
If it's that order, clearly that's the cost of consultation, not of creating a new master plan. So we're going to build on the work that LUC already did on a master plan, and the consultations we had A, B, and C at the last time we consulted options A, B, and C, and options A and B were strongly disliked by the majority of those concerned. So are we starting from option C, or are we going back to options A, B, and C, or variations, or something entirely new?
I think that slightly remains to be seen. I think one of the challenges from those different plans that were available were there were some very vocal people who were very anti a kind of a wetland feature. But then I've also had a huge number of people email me who are very pro having a wetland feature. It's not for me to kind of make a decision about whether we should have one or not, because I'm not an expert on wetland features. Likewise, there have been people who have been writing to me about having, you know, some kind of planted orchard area that could also be an education space. Other people have written to me about having a sensory garden aspect. There's been a real wealth of ideas come through, which is amazing. And again, it's great to see that passion. But I think for me, that's why I think it's important to try and make sure those views are heard. So I think we will, as Steve says, we will use one of the pre-existing plans as a jumping off point. But I think getting a feel for the views of residents and people who use scrubs as to what they really, really like to see there. Because again, I think we've got a really unique opportunity to turn this into this amazing urban wilderness as the kind of jewel in the crown of the borough, particularly when we're thinking about the future of green space and how scarce it is, particularly in places like London, really high quality green spaces, and how unusual the scrubs is. For me, I want to really make sure that we build something, build is the wrong word, we work on scrubs in a way that makes it as ecologically diverse as it possibly could be. recognise its importance. So I think that's a slightly long-winded way of saying I think we will build on one of those earlier plans, but it feels really important to try and get some of that feedback and some of the passion and some of the ideas that we've had from the community and feed that into the new kind of vision for the scrubs.
Can we please remind all our consultants that our Act, which governs us and created us, says that the scrubs is for the exercise and recreation of the inhabitants of the metropolis, and everything else that happens has to be subsidiary to that primary purpose. We are, yes, the urban wilderness you describe is important, but that is not our primary purpose.
I think with 200 acres, we've got a lot of space for all of those aspects. I think there's a lot of space for recreation. I think the point about all Londoners is really important. As you know, I'm really, really committed to try and make sure it's as accessible as possible. And so that's what I'd really like to see in this plan. So yes, absolutely, it's there for the recreation, whatever that means to individual Londoners, but that it's also accessible, and it does, particularly given the climate emergency, it does serve a purpose as something that's really ecologically diverse. So is there anything else on that? Miriam, your hand is still up. Is that a legacy hand?
It's a new hand. Just one other question, which is a slightly broader question about the HS2 ecological mitigation funding. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the funds are sort of drawn down as and when required or agreed. So I guess one, is that correct? And secondly, if there's a long delay to this process, is there any risk that due to sort of budget cuts more generally and HS2 costs spiraling out of control, the funding for the scrubs ecological mitigation could be cut back or pulled?
Steve and I have had a number of conversations about this already, and I think I'll let you speak, Steve, but I think we are looking into that.
Yes, yes, Chair. The current proposal is drawn down a bit like the invoices with Kensington Dragons, but we recognise that if it is delayed, it would be clearly beneficial that we, have a cut-off point where we can have the residual for the 10-year maintenance, because I'm sure they wouldn't want to continue for 10 years simply to pay us to draw down money each year. So I think we do want to reach a point where we can actually say this is the plan, this is the maintenance, and therefore we require this total.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything else on this item? Okay, Belinda, it's just you and I voting tonight, so the this is for committee to approve. So is this approved?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great, approved for me as well. Thank you. All right, number 4, HS2 update. Sorry, Steve, it's on the manager's report, item 4 in the manager's report.
Yes, Chair. So the first part of this is about the construction work. And as we know, they've got their drop curb on Old Oak Common Lane and now are starting on the access road. They are slightly behind from what I reported at the last meeting. So for the Sanford Brook sewer area, it says here that they were going to start the fencing for the hoarding on the 27th of September for 3 weeks. I've actually spoken to them and suggested they do that first rather than do the UTX site first. So they may well beginning to start moving hoarding around next week, is the plan now. So that will be good. And then they will start the sewer work in October, and it slipped now until June 2022 for reinstatement. It was originally May, so they are a bit behind, but still moving forward. On the UTX site, so the hoardings will go up sometime in September, and and the work again will start in October through to March. And that's really about the pipe, or the pipe jack works, as they say, to create the space for the utilities to go in. But as we are aware, the utility work won't start until May 2023 and finish in April 2024. So a slight delay, and the delivery of the station is still in 2029, although late 2029. So, yeah. So if there are any questions on that, happy to take them, Chair. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next point.
No, I think just to say, I know you make this point later on in your report, but despite that slippage of a month for the SBS site, we have still had the news that it will be returned to us under the notice to treat route for the CPO.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. And there was some question on whether they were going to treat both parcels of land as the same in terms of when they return them, which clearly are poles apart, and they've confirmed that they will return the Stamford Brook sewer site to us next year in June. Yeah.
Which in the scheme of things is good news.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
I've included a diagram here, which is the future access point onto the scrubs for the utilities and the easements. You may have seen it before. It's been around for a while, but I wasn't too sure whether you had seen it. Certainly, LUC have seen it, and it's basically somewhere to park and turn vehicles to get access on the scrubs from Omelot Common Lane once the work's all been done. And there's a pink bit there, which I believe is the lay-by, and that's covered further later on in the report, which actually takes a bit of the scrubs. But I'll come on to that later on. But just to make you aware, that's how they're going to enter the scrubs in the future to access the utilities. I think there's still discussion to be done on what exactly will the surface be. Will it be a grasscrete or something similar, which will have to be maintained, and mown so vehicles can access it.
And just to be very clear on that, that's land that's already been cleared, isn't it? That's not new clearance that will be taking place for any of this.
Yes, that's correct. That's within the UTX site. And once it's all been restored and the utilities are in there, that's how they get to those utilities if they need to. The next bit really is about easements, and obviously this is what all the CPO and the notice of treat's been about, to get the easements in place with the utilities.
Steve, Miriam's hand has just gone up. Did you
sorry, yeah.
On that bit, Miriam?
Thank you. Yes, just a point, and I know this is very long-range planning, but it relates to something we wanted to raise in this meeting, which is vehicular access to the scrubs there, and obviously the cutting off access from the scrubs lane entrance will help, but I would suggest that any access point here would also need to have retractable bollards or the like, so it doesn't provide an access point for anyone who feels they might like to drive onto the scrubs.
Absolutely.
Yes, very good point. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve.
Chair, I believe Stephen's had his hand up.
Yes.
Oh, Stephen, sorry.
Yes, it's we had a meeting of the Friends trustee group yesterday, and we're concerned about the winter foot traffic on the main east-west route between, on the north side of the meadow, between the meadow and the embankment, having lost the secondary route to the HS2 enclosure, the one that's closest to the embankment. And there is a track, not all of it very passable, adjacent to the fence line of HS2, which is going to be replaced with hoarding. And there was a strong feeling that to make that a usable route all the way by clearing a bit of bramble would be really worthwhile. And I wonder whether that's something that perhaps would be very easy for HS2 to do while they're erecting their hoarding. Otherwise, I think we'd be keen to get approval for it and provide volunteers to work with ID Verde on it. But we think that a second east-west route through this coming winter will be really worthwhile.
On that, I've also had an email from Emma this morning about the matting that's currently there and keeping that so that people walk on that, because it's stopping people from wandering off elsewhere, which I understand Steve and the Friends are not completely opposed to. Good. Okay.
I think we're neutral on it. We think some of our friends won't like it, but some of our friends will like it. And so I think we think it might be a good one-year solution.
Sorry, but again, with some sort of method to ensure that as and when HS2 stop using it for vehicular access, it can't be used by anyone else for vehicular access.
Yes, completely. Steve, can we take those ideas away and have a think about those?
Well, I think the second one, Chair, is a now yes or no, because they are meant to be removing that matting this week.
I thought so. The email I've got, and sorry, my phone's just frozen, so I can't look at my email. I think it's not about the Braybrook Street access. I think it's the east-west matting.
Yeah, there's no matting east-west. It only goes from Braybrook Street to their compound.
Sorry, I've got this wrong. Of course there isn't. Yeah, Emma's, sorry, I've read this wrong. So it's about proposing putting new fencing down, new matting down on the east-west path. Sorry, I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants. So let's have a conversation about this offline, because I'm trying to pick this up from an email that I'm not quite reading properly. Fine. Okay.
So certainly we could ask HS2 to create a path for us, because they will be moving their Harris fencing back slightly so they can work on the hoarding, and so they'll probably be doing a bit of that anyway. So we can, you know, ask them to do it, and so to a sufficient width, so it is a suitable path for people to pass on.
That would be very helpful, especially as they've agreed to put some decorative artwork on it and windows for people to look through and see what they're doing. So thank you.
Yeah. Right, so I have read this properly. I think the suggestion is to retain the Braybrook Street matting and then put new matting down. So fine with the new path. The existing, in fact, you know, I think we're coming on to the matting question in a minute, aren't we, Steve? Should we leave this for the trackway?
All right.
You want to finish off on easements, and then let's pick up the Braybrook Street access route conversation then.
Yes, so the easements, as I say, is about the utilities. We're well on discussions with Thames Water on the Stamford Brook sewer site, and discussions are now moving on, or have moved on, to planting over that easement. And as you'd expect, you know, large trees is a no-no, but you know, the things that we would be expecting to replace, like bramble and scrub and small planting, is perfectly fine. So we don't see an issue with that. So it's to make you aware that we won't be able to plant any large trees over that easement area, but I don't think anybody was thinking we would be doing that anyway. Okay, and then the trackway, yes. So they're meant to be starting this week to remove that trackway from Braybrook Street, so there's no vehicular access, and obviously it's been compacted underneath, so they were going to decompact it and use the soil, the topsoil they've removed in some of the compound areas to put back on, which already has seeds in from that location or that environment, and therefore would grow back very quickly. And we're also thinking about spreading sandy loam down as well, which we've already started doing on the main east to west area as an experiment, really. And when it first goes down, it doesn't look great. It looks a bit sparse, but it soon grows through. and that's what we intend to continue to do on that main route. But as I say, if people want, if the view is that you want to retain that matting from Braybrook Street into the scrubs, I can certainly speak to HS2 if that's the view.
I know there was a lot of concern from residents on Braybrook Street that the matting being down may cause HS2 to revert to using that route if they had future problems with Old Oak Common lane access. Miriam and Stephen, have you got a view on this?
I mean, I think it seems to me there are sort of mixed views on this, because obviously everyone is very concerned about not letting the paths descend into chaos, and therefore, you know, the good sort of work of regenerating the meadow being undone. I think certainly on the call with HS2 last week, some residents raised concerns about, it may be that an ecosystem has developed under the matting, and that's valuable, and that would be disturbed if it's removed. I mean, I think the primary aim is to ensure walkable paths and to not end up with a repeat of all of the division and arguing about how best to protect the meadow. So on that basis, I think, subject to it not being accessible to vehicles, I think I'd be pro matting.
Okay. Stephen?
I would accept the matting for this winter if HS2 are willing to remove it and do their work properly as previously described at the end of the winter, which of course we don't know when that is yet, depends how the season works out. But it'll certainly be well before June.
Thank you.
Can I just raise one other point on this discussion? And HS2, while they're moving fencing and putting up hoarding, clearing a path, obviously any clearance they do would have to be done sort of in accordance with, you know, sort of ecological method statements. So they'd have to be prepared to do that rather than just, yes, we'll clear it while we're here any old how.
Yes, agreed. Steve?
Yeah, yes, Chair, absolutely. So they will be clearing a bit of it anyways to do the hoarding, and they've confirmed it will be the same method statement as all the clearing they've done in the past. So that will be, you know, viewed by an ecologist prior to going in.
Thank you. Steve, I know obviously there's the trial of the sandy loam. What's your view on matting versus sandy loam?
Well, I think the matting obviously gives better protection, but having matting all the way along, so, you know, from Braybrook Street, you know, yes, but having more matting of that quality would be a significant cost. So I think we'd have to do sandy loam along the main path anyway. It's just whether we keep the matting from Braybrook Street, you know, going north really. That's substantial matting at significant cost, which is used for heavy vehicles in festivals, etc. You know.
Okay. So keeping that in mind, Miriam and Stephen, so I'm sort of looking to you here to be the voices of the community. If we're not going to put matting down on East West, but instead do sandy loam and keep Braybrook Street, do you think that will be do you think that'll be a popular move, or do you think that's going to be wildly controversial?
I don't think it will be controversial. I think the idea is to leave the matting through the winter and possibly even until the master plan begins to be actioned. I think there is also a thought that if extra matting was to be laid, the sensible place to do it would be on what is now a very narrow route from the airplane fields to the main path where the loam has been put down. But it's inevitably narrow because of it's squeezed between the HS2 enclosure and the meadow very heavy vegetation. So there might be an argument for a bit there. Steve, you know where I mean, I expect.
Yes, I do, and I can look into that if that's what you want me to do, Chair, because that's a smaller area. But
Yeah.
again, the quality of matting, well, I'll have to look into the cost. Yeah. But,
Yeah, fine.
I'll get back to you.
The reason I'm sort of hesitating on this is because there has been strong representation from residents on Braybrook Street with concerns about that matting staying. Miriam and Stephen, would you be able to reach out to the Friends, given we don't need to make a decision on this immediately tonight, but Steve, would it be okay if we make a decision on this by the end of the week?
Yes, I'll speak to HS2 and ask if they can leave it until we make a decision. Yeah.
Great. Miriam and Stephen, could you just ask the Friends how they feel about it? I will email the people who've emailed me with concerns from Braybrook Street, because if it is something that is working for us in the short term, it does make sense to keep it, but I just don't want to do it as a surprise to the community.
Yeah, no, we'll do a report to the Friends of this meeting anyway, and we'll include that and make it highly obvious that people need to respond on that point.
Lovely, thank you. Belinda, have you got thoughts on this?
Am I unmuting myself? No, obviously just what the residents would like.
Thank you. All right, well, let's park that for now and try and come up with a resolution as quickly as possible on that one. Lovely, thank you. All right, BT manhole.
Yes, just to let people know that there is a manhole BT want to access. It's actually on the HS2 Act land area. So HS2 have agreed to help them find it. But they will, again, once they do find it, we'll do some vegetation clearance. It's to the north of their Harris fence. But as we're aware, the Harris fence to the north is significantly less than the land they're able to take because they didn't need it. So it's just for information, really. If people see somebody clearing vegetation to the north of that fence, it is for BT and it is in the Act land area.
Thank you. And again, as it says in the report, that's all following the method used for the vegetation clearance.
It is, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right. BPO, we touched on this slightly already.
Yes, we have. So they have, we have met with them and indicated we wanted this guarantee on the return of land. They have written back initially and talked about the parcels of land and their process of handback and once it's declared surplus, etc. But it doesn't give that guarantee. In addition, they've also covered the lay-by, which I believe's in front of the access off Old Oak Common Lane, and there's also a small parcel of land they're talking about now, which will become a path as the Old Oak Common Lane realignment is going to move slightly. It's very small, but again, we've asked exactly where it is and where the dimensions are of the path and the lay-by, which will encroach onto Scrubs land. And so we've written back to ask for that, as well as this guarantee, this assurance that the land will be returned to the trust in the future. So that's gone and I'm waiting a response.
Thank you. Is it usual for bits of land to transfer from one authority to another?
I don't think it's usual. I think it's probably unusual, but I'm sure it does happen where there's been road widening and realignments, on borders.
Thank you. And yes, as you said, the SBS site will be returned to us in June next year. Belinda.
Oh yes, well, just I'm sure you agree. It's absolutely vital that they say they're going to give it back, the land. I mean, it's just ridiculous that they can't commit to that. I don't know what else we're able to do, but that is a really major thing. If they won't commit, I would have thought that they must do that.
Thank you. I think to clarify, we've had a verbal commitment that the land will be returned. we're just waiting for something. I
know. I don't like the sound of a verbal commitment. You know, people can change jobs and say that they knew nothing about it in 6 months' time. I just think we ought to really put our foot down there. I'm sure you agree with
completely. Stephen.
Yes, I wanted to agree with that we do need a written commitment, but I also feel that it's really not necessary for them to pay us and then us to pay them for the transfers of land. You know, consideration. My view is that the land is amenity land with no commercial value, so that a transfer for nil consideration seems appropriate.
Thank you. Steve, is there anything you want to say to that?
Well, I think that's the lawyer's view, that there could be an agreement to that rather than transferring money back and forth. Yeah, but we'd have to have that tied up legally. So, and that would mean we'd definitely have to have the land transferred back to us as part of that agreement. Otherwise, we've given the land away and we haven't got it back. So that needs to be tied in together. But the legal advice I'm getting is that that's probably the best way, but we need that guarantee in that agreement.
Completely. Thank you. Anything else on the CPO? No?
No, I don't think so, Chair. The final update on HS2 is the protesters. And following the fire in the camp on the 23rd, we did deliver letters to the protesters asking to stop the fires, and ultimately we've gone for a court order for possession of the land, and that was applied for and heard yesterday, and that has now been received. We were successful in that application. It comes into effect from 4 p.m. on Monday of next week. Protesters are very keen to remove the structures and leave the camp or leave the land as they found it before the camp. And so I phoned the protesters today and agreed that our Parks Department and ID Verdi will work with them to move the timber. So they'll dismantle the structures, bring it to the edge of the wood, and our parks will move that off the scrubs in their vehicles, those small buggies they have, rather than them having to carry it. And also we'll agree to remove any rubbish, so that we worked in tandem with the protesters to help achieve that by Monday.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping the dialogue open, and I think good that we're helping them take down the structures and helping them in any way we can. I think also it sounds like you've already had this conversation, but just making it really clear that they are still very welcome to protest and keep an eye on everything that HS2 is doing, as long as it's just not camping or having fires or whatever it is that the court order is permitting. So as anyone is, they're very welcome to come down and keep an eye on HS2, as long as it's just not in breach of the bylaws. To that end, obviously, I know the hoarding is going up. It may, and do we have something to keep an? I know you said that when they're building the hoarding, the fencing will temporarily go more into the scrubs than it should whilst they erect the hoarding. Have
Yes.
we got a way that we will be tracking to make sure that the hoarding that then goes up is in an area entirely contained within the Act, and there's not any land grab going on?
Yes, I've discussed that with HS2, and so we can be on site when they're doing that and can supervise what's happening to give reassurance to the residents, as we did on their GPS pegging out before. So yes, they're certainly bringing in the hoarding next week, and then we'll agree when they start erecting it that we're present, just so they get the line right. Yeah.
Fine. And you may not wish to, but friends and also potentially the protesters, would they be able to come along and scrutinise if they wish to as well?
Yes, everybody's Scrubs is accessible to everybody, as we know, and you know, yes,
Okay, great. Thank you.
of course they can. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Anything else from members on this item? Okay, thank you. All right, community safety.
Yes, the next item is a report from the law enforcement team, and Neil Thurlow, who is the head of community safety, has kindly come along to present this report and introduce himself and members of the team who will be dealing with the Scrubs in the future. So, Neil, if you're about, hopefully you are.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So, colleagues, Neil Thurlow, Head of Community Safety from the Council. Due to ICT issues, I'll remain with my camera off to save my voice sounding a little strange. I'm joined tonight with colleagues Ahmad Rafiq, who's the Senior Law Enforcement Officer for this area. And I'll ask Ahmad to introduce himself shortly. And also Paul Zaki, who is the ward officer, or one of the ward officers that cover the Scrubs. And again, I'll ask Paul to introduce himself, and maybe I'll do that now. Ahmad and Paul, will you just put your cameras on, please, and just introduce yourselves to the group and to the panel, sorry.
Hi, good evening. It's Ahmad Rafiq. I'm the Senior Law Enforcement Officer for the north of the borough. And I cover the areas Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Thank you, Ahmad. I can't see Paul on the call.
I think Paul may have some IT issues to connect.
Okay, so apologies, Chair. I know that Ahmad and Paul were trying to fix ICT challenges before this agenda item. So if Paul joins us, Ahmad, please do come in and let us know. So the report for today was intended to introduce the law enforcement team, to explain what we'd been doing over the Scrubs since our creation, and to give a more detailed feel, I suppose, for what the law enforcement team is intending to do, what its purpose and remit is, and how we want to work with users of the Scrubs, the community, etc. So without going through the report in too much detail, if I may just give a brief overview about our history. So in December of last year, Cabinet was signed off the investment for a new law enforcement team, absorbing a number of existing teams, but also significantly growing our previous enforcement offer. A service that is 72 strong, 72 officers strong, has been created. And the law enforcement team, over the last 9 months since our approval, has undertaken a lot of work to develop and evolve the service, to recruit a range of officers, to meet the needs of members, and to start to undertake the work with our residents, businesses and communities to engage and raise awareness of what we are and what we're doing. The service came into being in mid-May, when we started to undertake our operational shift patterns. And where we are now, Chair and panel, is that we offer a 24/7 service. The number of officers within the service is broken down within the document. We have 65 ward officers, 6 senior enforcement officers, and a service manager. Within those 65 ward officers, enforcement officers, apologies, we have a number that are ward-based neighbourhood officers. So what that means is that every ward in the borough has 2 ward officers, and those ward officers are designed to be there to get to know the borough, get to know their area, get to know their parks, green spaces, open land, estates, etc., and to ensure that our residents feel safe. They know who our officers are, and they can work with officers on environmental crime and issues. I won't talk about what we've been doing on Wormwood Scrubs, because I'll ask Armin to cover that as the senior for that area. But just to say that in addition to the neighbourhood officers, of which, as I say, there's 2 per ward, we also have a night team. So that allows us to have officers patrolling the borough during the evening, and again addressing those ASB hotspots, undertaking high visibility patrols, and tackling the challenges that a borough will face of an evening which is different to the daytime. The daytime officers, they will work between 7 AM and 10 PM on a rota basis, 7 days a week, with the night team working between the hours of 8 PM and 7 AM. Ahmad, if I pause there, could you go through for the panel, please, our work in particular around the scrubs and what we've been undertaking in that area, please?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Law enforcement team, which is my team in the north of the borough, we're taking daily patrols, AM and PM, high visibility patrols, just walking through the wood area and also on the green. What we are trying to do, we're trying to reassure the public and safeguarding the assets we have there. So we're connecting with HS2 protesters, just checking their well-being, and also looking at if there's any further damage to trees or the environment there, and also checking the well-being of HS2 protesters. And also one of the key elements is just to check if there are any additional camps there, and if a different organization is also there just to support them further. So these are the things we are looking at almost every day. And part of that one is also checking on unauthorized music events. We have engaged with one of the UMEs in the past. We seek assistance from the police, and we safely evicted them from, I wouldn't say evicted them, removed them from the parks with the police help. These are just a few things. And also we have found vehicles parked there on the green bit of the grass area on the green. Sometimes the bookings from the different organizations, they are happening, and sometimes they're by mistake or just to facilitate the loading and unloading, they take the vehicles there on the green. So we engage with them, we educate them, and we ask them politely to remove their vehicles and park in the designated areas. It's just to ensure that there's a minimum damage to green and infrastructures there. Also, we check on any burning of grass, any trees, or any broken trees by any outside agents. So this all happening. And also we check on anyone who is using the facilities there which are unbooked. So we encourage and we report such of the organizers to our sports team to make sure that everything is processed through them. Part of our duties is we lock the parks in the evening. That is seven days a week, and just make sure there's safe access and safe exit from the double gate, a yellow gate at the entrance of Wormwood Scrubs, and also making sure there's no defects to gates, metal bollards, fence trees, or grass path or car parking areas. We also work closely with the partners like HS2 people there, and also the SNT of the north area, which is Wormwood College Park, and also some other intelligence-based teams there. So also one of the partners we got, the ID Verdi, we work closely with them, and just to keep an eye that everything is going ahead nicely. How you can connect with our service, we got a dedicated email address, that is lat.hf@lbhf.gov.uk, and we got a dedicated page on our website that can be accessible under law enforcement team. These are just the basic ones where you can connect us. You can, if there's any residents or councillors, if they would like to arrange a walkabout with us, you can directly email me at ahmad.rafiq@lbhf.gov.uk. However, any routine matters can be sent to our inbox, which is lat.hf.lbhf.gov.uk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed.
So maybe if I can share just one final thing we didn't mention. The service is uniformed. So all of our officers are in a unique and bespoke uniform for Hammersmith and Fulham. And that is in order to allow residents and businesses to identify who they are. We will be wearing white shirts, black trousers, black shoes, high visibility vest and or outer coat with a a hat with a red and white cap band law enforcement team emblazoned on the front and back of all of our uniform. We'll also have our vehicles, which will also be labelled with the Hammersmith and Fulham law enforcement team as well. The default being, however, that our team patrol on foot, that they are accessible and can engage with residents easily and at all times. But I'll pause there, Chair. I think I've spoken enough and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's already helpful. I can see there are some questions. Just in the report, I can see that there's a phone number that people can contact you on as well. I think, again, it would be really helpful to have a list of the sort of things people should contact you about and the sort of things that people should just go straight to the Met. For example, I think over the weekend, for 2 nights in a row, there were fireworks going off on the scrubs, and it would be good to know to reach out to about those, and also what the response time is. I can see we've got questions from Belinda. Can I go to you first?
Oh, I'm very happy to go after Stephen. Or shall I just briefly say, first of all, just what a wonderful service. I'm so impressed. It sounds also very like the 24/7 service that we used to have on Shepherd's Bush Green. It just sounds fabulous. Can I just ask if the phone number? I remember that we used to have sort of stickers or fridge magnets that people could take home and put it in their diary, or on the fridge, and it's just quite handy to have that phone number, I think, available. Just a suggestion, but otherwise fabulous, really great.
Great, thank you, Belinda. I don't know, Chair, should I respond to that comment now, or should I take both questions first?
Stephen, should we go for your questions and then do them as one?
Thank you. It sounds wonderful. So I'm sorry if my questions are going to be slightly less adulatory than Belinda's. I wish it was as you describe. I can only tell you that none of the trustees of the Friends of Wormwood Scrubs, and we reckon we walk on the scrubs between us between 50 and 100 times a week, at times of day between 7 in the morning and about 8 at night. None of us have ever seen any member of your team on the scrubs, or neither seen them nor met them. You say you engage with partners. You haven't engaged with the Friends of the Scrubs at all, who are regarded as sufficiently of a partner to have nominees on this committee, as Miriam and myself. So I think you have more to do in making yourselves known to the users, because that's some very regular committed users who you have completely failed to engage with. I'm slightly bemused by the idea that we have main gates, let alone that they're locked daily, because I don't really think there are gates to Wormwood Scrubs. If only it was surrounded by fences and gates, it would be so easy to manage, but it isn't, and that's one of its glories. That's the first slightly less adulatory. All you say sounds wonderful, and if it comes to be true, I'll be very pleased. I have heard comments that when people ring your number, they get a "we'll get back to you within 3 days," or perhaps that's when they email you. And I think that adds considerable degree of force to the need to understand what people are supposed to ring you about, as opposed to ringing the police about, because frankly, most things that people are ringing about, "we'll get back to you within 3 days," is not much use. So I look forward to meeting you and working together, but I think you have further to go than perhaps you recognise.
Thank you, Stephen. Neil, bit of a mixed bag there.
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Belinda. So if I respond, so let's talk about the engagement. So what I can say straight away is that Ahmad is on the call, and Stephen will absolutely link in with yourself and the trustees, and Ahmad can do that. We can exchange emails tonight, or if not, through the group outside of that via email. In regard to where our offices are, so it's very unfortunate, and I'm saddened that you haven't seen the officers on the scrubs. I can assure you that we have spent a lot of time up on the scrubs, engaging with a range of people a range of times. As part of our uniform, which is being rolled out, as I mentioned, one part of it which will really help with the transparency for everyone about where we've been and when we were there, is in regard to our radios. So all officers will be issued personal issue radios. Those radios are for officer safety, but they also contain GPS. So what that means is that at any point we can GPS track where our staff are, but equally we can run snail trail reports. So we can show to residents when we're in the scrubs, at what times, where we patrolled, and the patrol route, and that will help to give that confidence and reassurance that we are where we say we are, and we have been there when we have been there. In regard to the contact, so the publicity for the service is going to be increasing. We've had to take a lot of new staff in and develop the service to ensure that we can meet residents' needs and expectations. The phone number that we're asking people to use is through the contact centre. So the means of which contact the service initially is that residents are asked to call the contact centre, and is also the out of hours contact centre, and they'll be connected through to the team. The reason that we do that is because the team is 24 hours and officers obviously have rest days and work different shifts. The reason that the law enforcement team email address has an auto response is to let residents know that that email was received, and we say 3 days to ensure that we can respond to everything in that time. When those are coming through to us, if I explain, and hopefully this will give the reassurance, and when that time comes when you contact the service, I really welcome your feedback as to whether this is as to your experience. So residents will contact the service one way, via email, via the phone number. The call is then logged to the ward officer or to the officer on duty if it's outside of hours, and we respond. What will then happen is the ward officer will update you on that, what we did, where we're there, what the outcome was. And then what that means is, for yourselves as the Scrubs Committee, for instance, you'll then have Paul's direct email address, and you can then start to build that relationship up with him. When Paul was then on annual leave or on rest days, if you were to email him direct, you'd get an out of office from him saying he wasn't around, to ensure that you know, as you would do if you emailed the police, safe neighbourhoods teams. And then, you know, we would then be able to kind of continue to monitor that interaction via the letting box and via the phone number. It's really important to us that all of our interactions are recorded and logged, because there's nothing more frustrating for residents, and there's nothing more frustrating for myself as the head of service, where you can't track down that call to ascertain what happened if there's dissatisfaction, but equally where there's congratulation. And so that's why we're asking for it to go through those routes. The law enforcement team website will be updated regularly, and those snail trails, good news stories, and advice about what we've been doing in your ward will be updated on a regular basis as well. I hope that answered your question. I wasn't too long, Chair, in responding.
Not at all, thank you. I can see that both Miriam and Stephen have popped their email addresses in the chat and asked for a chat in the coming days. So I think that sounds like a good thing. Miriam, have you got a question?
Yes, and it's more of a question on or a point about something that needs to be addressed. I mean, Ahmed mentioned that the team have been engaging with people driving vehicles onto the scrubs itself and discouraging that strongly, which is good. The other issue that came up at our trustee meeting earlier this week was that a lot of people are not, well, they're either cycling across the scrubs, or sort of using the scrub, and or are sort of creating their own alternatives to the quiet way cycle path, and to such an extent that Google Maps is now suggesting a cycling route running along the edge of the HS2 Stamford Brook sewer compound. So if that's something that the law enforcement team could start to focus on, because obviously people are only meant to cycle on the existing quiet way tracks.
Yep. So absolutely, Miriam. What I'd be really keen is that in the chat, when you engage with Ahmad, to kind of help him with that understanding and knowledge, where you're seeing those on things like Google Maps or other sources.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we'll do that sort of offline when we get in touch after this meeting.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's these sort of things, Miriam, that as residents and as Scrubs users, you guys will know that local knowledge that our officers may not yet have. And absolutely, we want to learn from you to get us up to that level as quickly as we can. So I'll see that Ahmad's obviously on the call. We've got the details in the chat. Ahmad will contact you and arrange to meet with you all as soon as is possible.
Great. If Ahmad would contact Miriam and myself, we'll set up a Zoom between the three of us or a walk between the three of us very soon.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Neil and Ahmed. Lovely.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Steve. Number 6, Park Lodge.
Yes, thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, we presented sort of 5 options for the Park Lodge. And after consideration, you asked for a costed option, or a price for a costed option of a hybrid, which was to have a building for a single-story building for refreshments and community use of classroom and public toilet, rather than accommodation above it. And I had secured that with a quote of just under £2,000. So, if you're happy with that, we can get that feasibility stage done. We did go back on the costings as well, because everybody thought they were high, but they've sort of given us a blanket sort of answer that they believe they are correct on construction standard pricing. So that's where we are. So there's a cost to take a feasibility forward of about £2,000 for the community refreshment and toilet facility.
I'll let Stephen come in first before I do. Stephen, I think you're muted.
I think I was one of those who said the costs seemed extremely high. What I'm wondering is, and I think £2,000 to do what they're now asked to do is also not very high, but high. And I wonder whether we are suffering from having to follow, if we are having to follow all the rules of local authorities, whereas we are actually a charitable trust managed by a local authority. And I wonder if that's something that is worth looking into, because if we don't have to follow the rules that local authorities have to, I think we will get all kinds of work done at significantly lower cost than we're being quoted. And there's a quote later on for knocking down and building a bit of wall for about 10 times. I don't know how long the wall is, but it seems like a huge cost.
That's it, yes. It's 40 grand to knock down a wall, which is a bargain if it's the size of the Great Wall of China, but I suspect it's not. Yes, so Steve, this is a conversation I've had with Heather already, because I just think the costs seem mad. She said that she was going to look into whether we could somehow skip the procurement process and the contracting process, as we're a charitable trust, not the council itself. I wonder if that's going to make a difference. I certainly hope so. Because again, the costs that were quoted for Park Lodge seem crazily high for what it was. £2,000 exactly. I mean, it's, in the scheme of things, it's not that much money, but for a quote to look at some building work still feels quite high. I don't think, I mean, I think there is a place for consultants, but I wonder if we are, as Stephen says, being charged rather more than market rate if we weren't attached to a local authority. So I wonder if there's just a piece of work we could do to look at whether we are paying rather more because we are attached to our VHF.
Yes, Chair, I can ask that question on whether we can avoid the procurement rules. My gut feeling is we can't, but I will check. also, if people know of contractors who they think provide good value for money, we can add them to our list of people we can use, and then go directly to them. So that is another route if people are aware of good, high quality, good value contractors.
Yes, I think the problem, Chairman, if I may just jump in, is that the contractors who offer good value aren't willing to spend the time filling in the forms they have to work for local authorities.
That may well be the case. Belinda.
Oh yes, sorry, I'm way behind here. I just wanted to agree that it's a huge amount of money, and we are a charity, so just agreeing.
Thank you. Which bit are you referring to?
Oh, with the quote and everything, I just think it's crazy.
Thank you. Fine. Okay. Steve, I'm still really keen to take this forward and look at the future of Park Lodge, not least because that building is obviously not really fit for purpose. I suspect that if we continue and spend the 1,950, we will get an equally high quote. I completely understand why there are the procurement rules in place. I think I would like to know if we can circumvent them as the trust. Again, as I said in the last meeting, my knowledge of house building is, or building structures is very, very much limited to watching grand designs. So I'm not saying I'm in any way an expert, but it does feel like an awful lot of money that's being quoted, which I think was confirmed to me seeing the cost of the wall demolition and rebuilding further down the report. It does just feel very high. If those are the costs and there's no way around them, then I think we can have that conversation. But as I say, I think Heather's already started to look into this for me, but it would be helpful to know either way if there is potentially a cheaper route that we can follow without compromising any of the quality and safeguards.
Okay, Chair. Yes, well, I can come back to you outside the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to spring that on you. Fine. Okay. Catering concession.
Yes. Yeah, we're no way forward on this, and we have created a new concession. It's a license actually, more than lease. So apologies for that. For our concessions across the borough, so that's now in place, and that's because we've had issues with other concessions in other parks. So that's been rectified, which has delayed getting this catering concession on the scrubs. So we will go back to them now and see if they will still wish to continue as it's coming into the autumn, because we now have the paperwork in place, which everybody's happy with.
Stephen?
Okay.
Could we be advised of the start date so that we can publicise it properly if it happens, so that we can give it the best possible chance of getting off to a good start? And so that everybody is aware that it's there and authorised and everything they should know about it.
Yes, absolutely. Let's hope that the lovely woman who wants to do it is still keen after the delay. Fine, thank you. Grounds maintenance and site management update.
Yes, so I think we've covered the sandy loam on the main route, but we've also done a lot of bark. The volunteers have done a lot of bark chipping in the woodland paths. So a big thank you to them for that work. It's much appreciated, to protect those woodland paths. So that's the sort of maintenance. The meadow sign, we're proposing to remove those now that the bird nesting season has ended.
Yep.
Everybody's happy with that.
Is your hand up in relation to the signage?
Well, signage and the hedging around the signage. Is this an appropriate time to mention that?
I don't believe the hedging is elsewhere, so yes.
This was on our discussion yesterday for the trustees of the Friends, and we think that it might be helpful and reduce the tensions between those who think there should be impenetrable hedging on the eastern boundary of the meadow against the airplane field, and those who disapprove of it. And those who follow the chat group will have seen that, and those who visit the site will have seen that there's groups of people who remove it and groups of people who put it back, and it's not good for harmony. And I think that there is a feeling that it would be very helpful to have a single form of not too obvious access there, which will need approval from yourselves, OBHF, that is to say. And I suspect, Steve, you'll be being formally asked this in the coming days. And then when it's bird nesting season again and the signs go up all around the meadow again, that space can be closed with a gate or a rope and a sign on it saying, you know, please don't go through here, it's bird nesting season. So I think that we do want to protect the area when it needs protecting, but we don't want to block it off to the annoyance of those who feel, and they're right, that they have the legal right to walk wherever they want on a common.
Yes, although I don't think they've got the right to vandalise, as we have seen in recent months. I mean, I'm very, very keen for there not to be an ongoing battle about people who are pro-hedge and anti-hedge. I think we're all completely sick of it. And I also think the rather unedifying behaviour of people turning up to rip it down needs to stop. If that feels like a gate going in could bring some of that to a pause or to a halt, I think that's a good thing. If that's all right with you, Steve and I, all the officers, will discuss that and come back in the next few days. Perfect. Great. Thank you. All right. Traffic management. Oh, sorry. Signage.
Yes.
I think fine for those signs to come down for now. And yes, as Stephen says, thinking about the plan for next year from early on and publicising that so people know what to expect.
Okay, Chair. Yes, traffic management. So this is the Scrubs Lane issue, which has been a problem for some time and has increased with more access to the Scrubs over COVID. So we've investigated a solution, which is rising bollards in the road and having a fob to access that, and numbers to the 4 numbers to access the stadium or the pony. The pony and the pony centre, sorry, and the or the depot, and another number we could use, sort of all-purpose general number. So that's the proposal: rising bollards with fobs or phoning where you're going to, if you don't have a fob. The cost of that is in the report. It's 63,000 with an annual cost of 1,600. It is past 68, which is really the vehicle, hostile vehicle mitigation. So, you know, if there was a vehicle trying to get in, it wouldn't be able to get past these bollards. So happy for the committee to consider that, Chair.
I'm very pro this. Just again, the costs seem very high, but yes, I'm very pro this. It looks like as a committee we are also very pleased with this. Belinda.
Oh yes, I would agree. The costing is pretty outrageous, but you know, it's a very, very good idea.
Fine. I think that's approved by the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yes, the next one is the depot wall, which has been raised by you all. So serious health and safety issue, actually, that we do need to pull it down. And actually, we've started doing that because of the health and safety, and put up a border. And the real cost, of course, is rebuilding it. It doesn't need planning permission to rebuild because it's less than 50 cubic meters, which I understand is the bar. So it's whether you wish to go ahead to rebuild or think of another alternative, or whether we investigate further quotes on that.
I mean, it sounds like it needs to go up again. It just seems like a very high cost.
40,000 pounds for 50 square meters sounds very expensive, and I should think alternatives should be thought of. I'm not familiar with it physically, so I don't know where it is or what it is or what height it is. So maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but maybe it doesn't need to be a wall constructed in such an expensive way. Maybe, cement blocks covered rather than something more expensive. I don't know, but it seems like very expensive for 50 meters.
Or potentially less than 50 meters, given that's the cut-off.
Yeah.
Steve, I think my feeling on this is kind of approving in theory. I mean, obviously the demolition's already taken place. Obviously it sounds like it needs to go up, but again, just going back to the earlier conversation, if there are ways to do things that aren't purely using council procurement, or if there are ways that things could be done slightly more cheaply. I mean, as I say, I've no idea the cost of building a wall. It might be that this is immensely reasonable for building a wall. I know there are labour shortages. I know there's shortages of all sorts of things because of the supply lines. But it would be good to know if this could be done slightly more cheaply. I've got Belinda and then Miriam.
Oh, I was just echoing the costing. It sounds like it's already underway though, but just echoing that.
I think that I imagine the demolition is the slightly cheaper part of it, and it is the building that's going to be the more expensive part. So, Miriam.
I mean, yes, I'm just sort of wondering if there's a reason why it needs to be a wall rather than a fence. I mean, is that a question of protecting what's in the depot? And if that's the case, that's sort of the council's problem rather than the Wormwood Scrubs Charitable Trust's problem.
Or Burlington Danes' problem.
Or Burlington Danes' problem.
Although, yes. Steve? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't think it's a case of the wall protecting it, a good high fence would protect it as well. Of course, people want to get in, they get in, don't they? I think it's the boundary wall probably runs quite a long way around the site. And so I think it's sort of in keeping with what's already there, but we can have another look, and come back to the chair. I could also speak to Burlington Danes to see if they have any contractors that maybe they can assist with, and we pay the school to do it. That's another way around it. Maybe might be a cheaper option. So yes, happy to look at options. I think the key thing is that we have knocked it down because it was a safety issue, and it's what we put up to secure the depot and the school boundary in the future.
Thank you. And I'm glad to hear that it is no longer a health and safety issue. I think the theme of this is just bulking at some of the cost of things coming through. So as I say, it may well just be that this is how much things cost in Brexit Britain, but let's see if there are ways to do things that don't cost as much. But yes, so obviously it sounds like the demolition's really taking place, so I think we can approve that. But yes, I think let's see what can be done, but in theory approving. Fine. Signage.
Yes, Chair. So Heather's been working on this. So got a quote for 3 lockable notice boards, just to control what goes up and somewhere to put signs or posters, which we've approved of. And so it says to be noted. So I think that this has already been asked for. So we're just going to get on with those if that's
I think
okay.
we've approved the funding. It would be good to see the notice boards just before we spend the money on them. I don't know if that needs to be a whole committee thing, but yeah, it would just be nice to see what we're spending the money on, because the current ones could be a bit nicer and could be slightly more in keeping with the aesthetic of the scrubs. Stephen.
Yes, I think it would be very good if committee members could see the proposed content of it before it's finalised, perhaps we could see it by email and make our comments back to Heather by email. And there's a strong suggestion that it should include QR codes and websites for all the various things like the LET and the Friends of Wormwood Scrubs and anybody else that should be properly drawn to the attention of anyone who's interested.
Yes, I think that's a nice idea, especially given we're all experts in using QR codes now over the past year. Miriam?
Yes, just a very quick question on, do we have a sense of the timing on this and when these boards may actually go up?
To be honest, Miriam, I haven't. Heather was dealing with this, so she's obviously got a supplier because she's got the quotes. So it'll just be the time for installation. So I think it'd be quite quickly, quite quick once you've approved them.
I think Heather's back next week, so maybe she can just send them round to us after that.
Yes.
Brilliant. Network rail depot.
Yes, and again, we're asked to look at this on the North Pole open space. They wanted the area for parking and storage. They needed planning consent, but they don't seem to have secured that. The compensation offered wasn't generous, and therefore, discussing it with the chair, we feel that any further disruption should be avoided and should not take that forward.
That's it. I mean, they came back. They had a really quite slightly insulting offer. First of all, that was something like 7,500 for 8 months occupation of North Pole open space, which obviously said no to. They immediately came back offering, I think, 25,000, which I've also said no to because again, it just didn't feel like enough to warrant that level of disruption. I think they've since come back and said, tell us what you want, which is an interesting proposal. Unless it is something incredibly generous, I'm minded to say no because it's directly by people's homes. I don't like that the North Pole open space just being seen as a depot area. In my mind, unless there's a particularly generous offer which we could then directly spend on improvements on that space so it's no longer an attractive space for people looking for a depot or a dumping site, I'm not minded to say yes. Miriam.
Yes, I think we sort of briefly touched on this at the last meeting, but my question is, the utility company that's been using the site previously, did they pay rent and where did it go?
It's a very good question. I don't know.
Well, Chair, I don't know the answers, but one would have hoped that there was an agreement for them to go on that site, and then I can investigate that and make sure it has come to the trust.
Could we have an answer on that next time? Perhaps it will be really helpful. Chair, I think that there must be a figure of which we would be willing to accept the disruption for the residential neighbours. I don't know what that figure is. It might be something like £5,000 a month, I should think. But they would also have to agree not to do work, not to do work for their storage and removal outside the usual construction hours, which I think are 8 in the morning till 5 at night, 5 days a week, something like that. So there must be a figure.
There is. I think the reason I say it has to be high is because that green space is used quite a lot by residents who like to sit up there, particularly they have done over the summer because, for obvious reasons, people haven't been able to travel very much or have been stuck at home. It is over the winter, so some of that is slightly mitigated. But again, for the disruption that it would cause, especially after 18 months of that site not being able for them to use it, it would have to be quite a high figure. As I say, they've come back with 25 at the moment, which we've said no to. Did you have a figure in mind, Stephen?
I should have thought 5,000 a month would not be unreasonable, but maybe it should be higher than that. It's not. I don't pretend an expertise in it, but you know, they obviously want it quite badly. So maybe there's a figure higher than that they should be quoted.
Well, the dates that they proposed, to give you my email, is the very end of September until late February. So at 5,000 a month, that's about 25,000.
Well, 10,000 a month then. I don't know. I don't know what the right rate is. Somebody must know what the right rate is for a utility dump of that kind. But and those are months when the residents are less likely to be using that space just to be on, and you can't exactly exercise on it, and it is right by a very busy road.
I would say suggest 100,000 and see what they say, because 100,000 you could actually then make some real improvements to the site. Tell them that's the price in Brexit Britain.
I think that was the number that was in my head, which if yes,
okay.
but if not, then we're not going to lose anything there. Fine. Okay, well, let's do that then. We've had an offer of some small trees that would be supplied free by an environmental consultancy called Green Shoot, and those could be planted on the North Pole open space. So I think that sounds like a nice thing. I'm assuming there's not any dissent there. So lovely. Okay, great.
All right. The next item is the grounds maintenance contract. So the negotiation was completed, and certainly the chair and Miriam are involved with that, as well as Emma from the Friends. Unfortunately, it has got delayed with a wider issue on the housing service exploring the possibility of bringing their services in-house. And so with that delay, and ultimately a decision was made that it should go out to tender, as with everything else. And because it was all advertised at the same time and they're sort of linked but separate lots, we had to wait for that housing decision. So we've got that now. It's gone out for final tender, and I say it's due in on the 15th of September. So we've missed this committee. It does go to a contract assurance board in the council, where officers, ratify the park's evaluation of them before making recommendation to the members and the trust. So we will have that at the next meeting, or we can advise before then.
Okay, thank you. Stephen?
It seems to me that this is one of the most important decisions that this committee will make during a several-year period. It's a huge expenditure of money. It is the maintenance and management of the whole scrubs, subject to the master plan works, and without in any way questioning the process that it's all gone through, I do think that the recommendation, when it comes out of this contract assurance board, should come to this committee. We can have a very quick meeting, as we did on the CPO issue, at which we can discuss it, whether that's open to the public or whether there's commercial confidentialities, and it can't be. I have no idea, but somebody will know the answer to that. But I don't think we should simply say other people are making the decision with us having had some input. It's too important to us before we finalize it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to, is that something that we could do?
Well, I hear what Stephen's saying on the importance of it. I think the decision is made in the evaluation of the tenders once they come, and and officers score them, and then they're moderated, and that is then reported to the assurance board to make sure that we have done it correctly. And so the assurance board are really saying, yes, the evaluation's been done, and this is the recommendation based on the procurement rules. So, you know, we could certainly share a report with the committee. I think that could be public because we're only reporting on that one lot, and the yes, that could be a public meeting. But I say I think it'd be difficult to say no, we don't like that decision once it's been evaluated and you know, scored.
I'm not really suggesting we should be, because we don't have the ability to second guess the end result of a long process, simply that we should have the opportunity to understand it and review it, and that we should be finally approving it rather than some committee of the council finally approving it. I think that's what I'm saying.
Thank you. And Steve, is that the process after? So the council make a recommendation that then goes forward. Does it then come to us to approve?
Yes, that we can certainly do that, Chair.
Okay. Fine. Stephen, is that all right with you? Fine. Lovely. Good. Thank you. And so have we headed off the need for an additional meeting? Yeah. Fine. So that will come to the 15th of December meeting. Lovely. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. I think we would want to make a decision earlier than that, because we need to give, if it is a new contractor, 3 months notice to mobilise.
Okay.
And the new contract starts the 1st of February. So if the committee wish to approve the recommendation, I think we would need a separate meeting.
Fine. Do you know when CAB are meeting in October?
They meet weekly, so
okay,
it is flexible. Yeah.
Fine. But we could do a late October meeting.
Yes.
Fine. Do you think late October will work, or do you think there's a chance of slippage and early November would be better?
Well, late October would give the 3 months.
Yeah.
Mobilisation. Yeah.
Fine. Amrita, would you be able to find a date for us in late October?
Yep, I can have a look. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay. Play equipment on Braybrooke Street.
Yes, we were asked to apply for the HS2 Community Fund, and I'm pleased to say that an application has gone in. So we'll just wait for a decision now, so we can move that forward, Chair.
Great, thank you. Assuming that hopefully that will be successful. If it's not for any reason, what's the timeline for the repairs to the play equipment? Well,
we would have to come to you and present a cost for it, and you know, whether you wish to pursue it, or we could resubmit. Of course, they may say, well, you haven't met the criteria, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm hopeful that we will get a positive outcome, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Weekend parking charges. Yes, I've been chasing this one down because this is the wording at the last committee, so apologies for that. And that's at least 6 weeks ago. So I don't know why we haven't had this implemented, and we'll endeavour to get a decision back to you or an explanation, because I see no reason now why we can't be charging if the order's been drafted and put out. So apologies to the committee that has not been followed through as we required. That's fine. Thank you. Could you keep the committee in the loop just when it is going into action, going live? And also, I think again, we just need to manage the comms around it, just let people to know that it's a trial and that we will be monitoring traffic on the surrounding streets to see the impact, etc. Yes, Chair. Okay. Thank you. Thames Valley Harriers Clubhouse at Limford Christie. Yes, I think this is a positive
bit of news. They're keen to refurbish and extend slightly their clubhouse to improve facilities for their members, and they've given some examples in Appendix 2, and are asking that we give that approval to do that, subject to the future development of the stadium.
Miriam and Stephen. Miriam? Miriam, you're muted.
In principle, Thames Valley Harriers sort of investing in Linford Christie and committing to Linford Christie is a very good thing. I mean, obviously, we would need a lot more detail, particularly on the extension, and all their drawings are very nice, but there's nothing that relates to size.
Does this need, you asked us both, do they require planning consent from anyone? I imagine they would.
I would have assumed so.
It seemed to Miriam and myself discussing this together that it was too early for us to approve it. I mean, we can say, yeah, looks good, do some proper work, do a proper drawing with a plan, get your planning consent. We're in favour generally, but I'm not sure that it's enough information for us to give a formal approval at this stage. And when it says subject to the future development of the stadium, I think we need to know kind of what that means. I mean, in the event that there's a football stadium built there and they're removed, do they get compensated? And if so, who does that? Or what? And perhaps this is the moment to ask, what is the status of the various options for Linford Christie Stadium, which were discussed extensively a year, 18 months ago, and because of COVID and other things, obviously that's been on hold.
Matt Rumble's not on the call, but as far as I'm aware, that's still on hold with everything else with HS2 and CPO and COVID sort of overtaking events. Steve, do you know the process of what TVH would need to do? Do they need to go to planning and get approval?
Yes, I believe they do. So I think they just want to approve to move it forward, and I think certainly they would provide further detail on what planning, the size of the structure, and then any compensation or at own risk, I think, was what we would probably want, wouldn't it? To get agreed before we give the final go ahead. Yes, so I can bring that back.
Yes, I think it has to be, if any approval has to be, yes, you can continue to explore it, but it's simply an approval to continue to explore it. It's not an approval of, for example, that by definition there will be a small extension. It's a sort of, we're not saying no, we need more detail to say yes.
I think that's right. So I think we're saying yes, we're happy to continue exploring it, but we will need rather more information before we can say yes, we're happy with this new building.
Yes, I think Chair, they'll be happy with that, so they understand what is required, and they can move forward to meet our requirements.
Just as a point of interest, I'm just looking at the budget total for their building works, and it's 234,522, which is obviously a lot less than the figures we had for Park Lodge. So maybe we can speak to their contractors. I appreciate it's a different building, but, and I'm appreciating really granular detail on the type of chairs that's been offered.
Yes. Although one has to wonder whether their contractors are also doing a bait and switch.
Yes. Who knows? Could I ask also that they be asked whether their cafe and toilet facilities would be available to non-TVH members or not?
Yes, Chair, I can come back on that now, because I was pleased with that. I mentioned, we would like a cafe for the scrubs and toilets. So, and they were said yes, certainly when the cafe is open, it's open to everybody, because they see that as more of a commercial benefit really to a contractor, or whether they do it themselves.
Great. It would be helpful to know the opening times that they're anticipating as well.
Yes.
I'm not expecting you to know that off the top of your head.
No.
Fine. Okay, great. So we're happy for them to continue exploring it, but we'd like to know rather more before they take any more conclusive steps. Fine. Events.
Yeah, can I just check?
Sorry.
Was that approved or?
We're happy for them to continue exploring it. It's slightly vague here in that it's just committee to approve. So we're approving them exploring their options. We're not approving the building of a new clubhouse at this point. So I think for the minutes, just say something like committee approved TVH exploring options for new clubhouse.
Okay, thank you.
Fine. Okay. Events. No events have taken place. No authorised events have taken place at Scrubs. So
no. And then, sorry, Chair. Yeah.
No, sorry, I spoke over you.
So I was just going to say, so 16 is the audit and accounts plan. So sort of not now, and to get us to an approval in December, which is in Appendix 3. So if anybody's got any questions on that, or we're happy just to move that forward, we'll there's a timetable in there on what they're doing and to meet the December committee.
Yeah, I'm happy for that, as long as we don't submit late again. I'm very happy with it all. Fine.
Okay.
Review of Pony Centre income.
Yeah, so this was an item raised last time, and so basically the income has been recorded to the council, although the council has been acting as landlord and managing the lease, and the income was very low, but it has started to increase in 2016. So the proposal is that the income this year comes to the trust, and that the council continue to act as landlord and charge a nominal charge back to the trust for that. But clearly there'll be a net benefit to the trust as a result.
Thank you. On this, I note it says trivial. Obviously the council's version of trivial is perhaps rather different to what our version of trivial may be. So could we have the numbers actually sent through to us as to what the costs have been, particularly in previous years, and what the recharge costs are likely to be, just so we understand our financial commitment going forward, the level of income to be expected, but also backdated as well. And I think Stephen and Miriam are going to have a question on this as well, about the historic income from the Pony Centre.
I think this is a matter of principle as much as it is of the amounts, and Chair has quite rightly asked for an estimate of the amounts. Well, we know what the income is and an estimate of the costs involved in fulfilling landlord's responsibilities. I think it's a very bad principle that the council appropriates property that belongs to the charitable trust, which it's clearly done since 2016. And I therefore would like to disagree with the proposal and say that I think that whatever the numbers are, and they may be trivial in everybody's terms, that the council should properly account to the trust for the income received from the Pony Centre since it ceased to be nominal in 2016, minus the costs it's incurred in fulfilling our responsibilities on our behalf. And if there isn't much money involved, I think it's the principle. And I think that applies to all sorts of other spaces, is and will do in due course, whether it's Park Lodge or Linford Christie Stadium as a whole, which frankly is a charitable trust asset that has been treated by the council as its own, with contributions from the charitable trust. I think the principles are bad, and when the money gets larger, which it can do sometimes on things, I think there are questions as to whether the borough, as our trustee, is at risk of being in breach of its duties as a trustee. And I'm sure it doesn't mean to be. I hope it doesn't mean to be. But I think it's very important that it can't be accused of being in breach of its duties as trustee.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, I mean, I would just second that and just say, I mean, as I have said before, I continue to think that the charitable trust should have control over all its assets, the associated revenue streams, and the costs, and that obviously includes Linford Christie, Park Lodge, and arguably the community centre. But that's just reiterating a point made previously.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I'll take that back to Chris Harris in Finance, and we will, if that's the recommendation, we will rectify that.
Thank you. It would also, could you just pass on to Chris, it would be helpful to have the exact figures, even if they are just listed as trivial, because again, he deals with a budget which is far greater than ours. Lovely, thank you. Right, 18. Steve, I suspect this is Carmen instead of you.
Yes, Carmen is on the call, been waiting patiently. So
thank you, Carmen.
Carmen, do you want to cover the figures?
Carmen, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I've just had a bit of technical problem.
Oh, that's fine.
Yes, yeah, sorry about that. So just my mouse. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just presenting the finances, and the current position is that we're 49,000 better than budget, and that's mainly due to the parking income being better than expected, and also the project manager is not yet in place, so we've saved on that, because we forecasted 75,000, but he's not yet in place, and Steve might be able to correct me on that when he's actually going to be in place, but I forecast him for about to be in place for 6 months. So what we see is that the parking income is actually to date is on par with what it was in 1920, and so because of that I've actually increased the forecast. So that's the main, so we're more or less on budget, apart from parking income being increased and the savings on the new staffing position that's just been introduced for a 2-year period. So if anyone's got any questions, Chair, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Carmen. I've got a question on KAA. Obviously, with the news this week about Grenfell Tower coming down perhaps slightly sooner than we were expecting, is that going to have an impact on budget if KAA go back to their original site sooner than expected?
Not in this financial year, I don't think.
Sorry, not
unless
financial year.
Yeah. So yes, it could affect next year's budget, but if they do decide to go back within this financial year, this budget would change, because I've forecasted it, but they've also got a lease that covers this financial year, so there might be I'm not sure if there's going to be any termination clauses or so, but I think what they did the last time is, even though they were going to leave, they did continue to pay, so that is just to be decided. We've got a formal lease with them, Department of Health, Department of Education, sorry.
Thank you. Miriam.
Yeah, I just had one question on the Linford Christie costs, and this one-off contribution to asbestos removal, which is £103,000. I don't think, but correct me if I'm wrong, that's something that's been discussed before, but perhaps I have just blanked it. So I guess my question is this a new issue, and what's the total cost?
No, this, through the chair, no, this is not a new issue. It was approved at least 2 meetings ago, and
I take it back. I obviously blanked it in the midst of all the other
yes,
issues.
the budget was increased. Yes, chair.
Yes, I think we did discuss it. I can't remember exactly when, but
I think, Chair, if I can come in, just to remind people, this was the tennis court rental issue.
Oh, yes. Yes.
The hospital contractors. So even though we've done this, we'll get a net income out of it.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. The way I read it was some sort of asbestos within the stadium, but no, we definitely did discuss the tennis courts.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else on budget?
Sorry, one other thing, as Carmen raised the issue of the Scrubs manager, what's happened to the Scrubs manager recruitment process?
I know Councillor Rowbottom is reviewing the JD, so I will check in with her where that is. Steve, do you have in your mind a kind of timeline for that?
Well, I think, yes, I only sent this to Councillor Rowbottom in the last fortnight, so to be honest, so she's looking at it now, and hopefully she did say she would come back to me this week. So once that's been finalised, we can advertise pretty quickly and interview certainly before Christmas, with hopefully get somebody in the new year. I think that's the realistic timescale. So we'd probably only be paying a quarter of the annual salary, Carmen, rather than 6 months. So be further saving there, I think.
Yes, Chair, there'll be a further quarter saving there.
Thank you. All right, anything else on the budget? Fine. Sorry, Carmen, that you've waited for so long. I think maybe in future meetings, should we move finance nearer the beginning so that you don't have to wait for 2 hours for us to talk through the budget?
Chair, it's useful for me because I pick up any additional finance points, because they often put proposals forward, and if it's agreed, then I add it to the budget. If it's not, I don't. So it helps me. So unless you want to do that, I'm fine with the situation. Thank you.
Okay, fine. That's very noble of you. All right, thank you. Fine. All right, I think that is the end of that report. Fine. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda, is there? No. Right. Well, with that then, is there any other business? Lovely. All right. Well, I will bring the meeting to a close then. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, finishing at exactly 8:30. Lovely. Everyone have a good evening.